It could take years to repair the damage caused by these floods. Days of heavy rain have battered parts of New Zealand's South Island. Some areas in the city of Nelson are unrecognizable. On the ground, the destruction is extensive. Roads are blocked and officials have closed schools. Entire communities have been forced out of their homes, with some declared unsafe or simply uninhabitable.
The hill basically just collapsed, and then we saw the dirt rolling straight to our property. So we just left the property at about 8:15, straight to a motel. And I came this morning to assess the situation. It's pretty bad.
City officials warn there's no timeline for when people will be allowed to go back home.
We will be taking a prudent approach, and I'll make no excuse for that. I would rather we protect the property and lives of people as opposed to allowing people back. And I cannot unfortunately guarantee that people will be in their houses again today.
Nearby towns have also registered record levels of rain.
What we experienced this week was probably the most intense increase in water flow in a river in a catchment that we've seen for 100 years.
More rainfall is expected, along with warnings of more damage.
This crisis has lasted weeks and it's not over yet. The worst monsoon rains in 30 years, inundating vast areas of land and hitting Pakistan's poorest province, Balochistan, the hardest. Hundreds of schools and thousands of homes have been destroyed here. Across Pakistan, hundreds of people have died and hundreds of thousands have been displaced, struggling to reach some kind of safety, to find some kind of shelter.
Floods have taken everything from us. We were only able to save our kids and few livestock. We are in dire need of help as early as possible.
We lost everything in the floods and left empty-handed. We don't have food, shelter, or even clean drinking water. Many of us are suffering from diarrhea and other gastro diseases, while the government is not doing anything for us.
Criticism of the government extends beyond the immediate response and back through previous governments. Plans to update infrastructure and resilience repeatedly not implemented, leaving people exposed to monsoon flooding every year. This year's enormous rainfalls particularly devastating. Pakistan's Prime Minister has repeatedly visited hard-hit areas this flooding season, insisting his administration is doing all it can.
The 30-year record for monsoon rains has been broken this year. It's a few hundred times more than normal in Balochistan. That's brought miseries to people's lives, but both federal and provincial governments are committed to helping these poor people to their utmost.
Pakistan has been ranked the 8th most exposed country in the world to the risks of climate change, a bleak window on the future for the newly grieving and displaced, contemplating how and where to rebuild their lives. Harry Fawcett.
Most of these people have lost everything. Floods have swept through the village of Tansa in southwest Pakistan, destroying their homes and livelihoods. Roads that were clear just weeks ago have turned to lakes, leaving thousands stranded.
We've had more rain this year. It's had a severe impact on many areas along the river belt. The water has levelled off in some parts, but it already destroyed homes, crops and infrastructure.
The aftermath is overwhelming. More than 1 million people have been affected by flash floods and landslides, and hundreds have died across 4 provinces. Climate change, officials say, is fueling unpredictable weather patterns. Entire communities across Balochistan province are homeless.
When you look at the amount of rain which has fallen on Balochistan province itself, it's 450 times what Balochistan receives in a normal year. So it destroys the home, it destroys the livestock, livestock drowning, it destroys the infrastructure, of course, bridge, road, and it destroys the crop.
Authorities say nothing could have prepared them for the extent of this year's monsoon rains. The army is helping displaced communities, but many survivors say the response has been slow.
We're not getting enough help from the government. We hear a lot of promises, but on the ground, it's poor people who are suffering. We have no food, no water, and we are living under the open skies at the mercy of God.
More heavy rains are expected in southwest Pakistan in the coming days. It's yet another concern for families who've lost everything and are forced to start over.
It's famed for being one of China's furnace cities, with the longest summers and hottest temperatures. But in the last couple of months, the heat in the southwestern city of Chongqing has been oppressive even by its own standards. Mercury levels have frequently topped 40 degrees Celsius and hit an all-time record high of 45 degrees earlier this week.
Yeah, it's hot as hell. I'm melting.
Many tourists come to Chongqing to marvel at its sights. The Jialing River might be what's most eye-catching now. It's a major tributary that meets the Yangtze further south, and it's dried up so much people can walk halfway across it.
I'm definitely worried. It could affect residents and those that need to use the water.
Forecasters have warned the dry spell could last well into September. Authorities have begun discharging water from the Three Gorges Dam to replenish the Yangtze and its offshoots, but normal flows could still be months away. Here in the city, people are cooling off wherever possible. This library, converted out of an old air raid shelter, has become a popular hangout. A breeze circulates through the funnel-shaped space, making it an ideal hideaway.
When it's especially hot, more people come.
But elsewhere, it's hard to escape the effects of this heatwave and the drought that's come with it. A short drive south of the city is Longjing village. With insufficient irrigation, crops here are dying.
Well, this here shows pretty clearly why crops are struggling. The water for this field behind us has receded about 20 meters away from the crops, and what's been left behind is just this bone-dry layer of mud.
Reports say more than 350,000 people in rural Chongqing are suffering because of a shortage of water supplies. Many of them, like one man we spoke to, are elderly and can't do much to fix the problem.
For irrigation systems, you have to buy pipes and machines. You have to spend the money, and it's not worth it because the stuff is already dried and died. What's the point of watering if it's already dead?
And with many scientists saying hotter days as a result of global warming are here to stay, days here for the people of Longjing could be numbered.
Let's get some more perspective on the climate crisis and more specifically that heat wave in China. Well, Eric Solheim was Executive Director of the UN's Environment Programme. He was also President of the Green Belt and Road Institute based in Beijing. He joins us from Oslo. Very welcome to the programme. So how serious could this become, do you think, for the thousands of communities who rely on rivers and irrigation for their livelihoods?
This is really serious. I mean, it's the worst heat wave in central China in 6 decades, and people in provinces like Sichuan and Jiangsu, and this is, of course, very heavily populated areas in central China, they're suffering directly from the heat. I mean, it's 40 degrees centigrade on many days. Added, it has major impact on agriculture, and it has a direct impact on the economy, because these provinces are heavily dependent on hydropower, and the water level in the rivers have come down substantially, so there is less hydropower, so people are forced to turn off air conditioning. And global companies like Toyota or the Apple suppliers have also been forced to stop their production for some days. Of course, it will come back, but it has a direct impact on people's lives and a long-term impact on the economy. So this is bad.
Well, indeed, how bad could that hit be on the Chinese economy?
Well, the Chinese economy is very strong, and of course it's a high-tech economy which will for sure come back, so I'm not really worried with the long-term effect of this heat wave. But the Chinese experts themselves are very clear that China needs to face much bigger heat waves in the future. They will be longer and they will be warmer. So China needs to prepare for more extreme weather. And of course, it needs to take its part in reducing the fear of climate. Last year, by the way, China had the most intense flooding in modern times in the Henan province, where the water which came down in just one day in the city of Shangzhou was unprecedented. It was enormous.
And what is China trying to do then to solve these issues now and for the future?
The good news is, of course, that China is now the world leader in basically every single environment-friendly technology. Let's face it, 80% of all solar panels in the world last year were made in China, 80% of all hydropower, 80% of all offshore wind power was made in China, and 70% of all electric batteries are made in China, 50% of all electric cars are running on Chinese roads. And even if you buy an electric car from Europe or North America, the chance that the batteries from China is very high. So China has moved from being a very polluted place 10 years ago, I mean, we all remember the black skies in Beijing, to now being a nation which is cleaning up, which is taking environment, and which is taking the lead on all green technologies. And we in the West need really to get up early in the morning if we want to compete with the Chinese on green technologies.
OK, we'll leave it there. Eric Solheim, thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Extreme drought conditions persist in northern Mexico. The city of Monterrey, home to some 5 million people, has been particularly hard hit.
People are fighting over the water. The trucks arrive and people don't respect the line. It's chaos in our neighborhood. It's sad, but what can we do? We need a miracle.
These are the driest conditions the region has seen in 30 years, with recorded rainfall levels far below average. During a recent visit to Monterrey, Mexico's president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, promised to continue to provide emergency government assistance.
I believe this situation will help lead everyone towards participating in the conservation of water so that we will be more conscious about the importance of this vital resource.
Experts say as much as 65% of Mexico's territory is currently experiencing moderate to severe drought conditions. They attribute it in part to this year's unseasonable La Niña weather pattern, which has pushed rain and cooler temperatures further north. Extreme heat and a lack of rain are also wreaking havoc across the border in the United States, prompting action from officials there.
The growing drought crisis is fueled by the impacts of climate change, including extreme heat, low precipitation, in turn severe drought conditions that perpetuate the climate crisis by increasing wildfire risk, affecting crop yields, and ultimately disrupting our ecosystems and the climate as a whole.
U.S. states like Arizona and Nevada have already been asked to cut back what they take from the drought-stricken Colorado River, which supplies water to some 40 million people across 7 U.S. states, and to communities in northwestern Mexico. Less water from the Colorado River is also raising longer-term concerns in both the U.S. and Mexico over potential food shortages if action is not taken to address the crisis. Manuel Rapp.
Many countries are in the grips of intense summer heat waves that are causing some of the world's crucial rivers to dry up. In parts of Europe, waterways have dropped to near record levels, halting marine traffic and disrupting factories and industries. Now, Germany is facing a crisis as the Rhine River, its most important shipping route, becomes difficult for ships to navigate. That's not only affecting freight supplies and costs, but the energy sector too. The disruption presents another challenge for Europe's largest economy at a time of high inflation, global supply chain problems, and a natural gas crisis. Economists are now warning this will have an effect on the region's economic growth. We'll bring in our guests in a moment. First, Al Jazeera's Dominic Kane has more from Cologne.
It could almost be a picture postcard of the Rhine. Goods barges chug up and down the river while children explore the pebbles on the bank. And yet, a closer look shows something else. For in most summers, much of this area would be submerged. But months of high temperatures and little or no rainfall have changed things.
What we see right now with the low water levels in rivers is the new normal, or it's even worse. The new normal will be even more extreme. We have seen a global temperature increase of 1.2 degrees on global average right now.
Seen from overhead, the situation is clear. This satellite image of nearby Düsseldorf shows the river now. This one, how it was in the same place 12 months ago. If the science of what's happening is clear, the practical application of it is causing problems for many different companies, the shipping ones in particular, because they look at the Rhine as it is now and have real concerns about how deep it is and how easily they can navigate it. And crucially, how much each of their vessels can carry.
Ships bringing salt here from Heilbronn usually carry almost 2,200 tons. Now they're arriving with 600 tons, and that shows. The less water, the less cargo on the ships.
And in this year of war in Ukraine, there is another drawback. With Russian coal now embargoed across the EU, many companies have paid to ship a non-Russian alternative via the Rhine instead. But as the demand has risen, so the water levels to allow it to be delivered have dwindled. Right now, most shipping companies are concentrating on the near future. With autumn just weeks away, they expect its cooler, wetter weather to replenish the Rhine. But some scientists say that too could bring danger.
If it starts to rain on such dry soils, the water cannot infiltrate into the soil, and we directly get surface runoff, and the water runs out of the system of our catchment and produces such flash floods as we know from California, for example.
The Rhine has run drier in summer before, but not often. It will have to rain a lot to return the river to its more normal state. Dominic Kane, Al Jazeera, Cologne.
All right, let's take a closer look at the River Rhine. It's one of the most important European rivers, flowing through 6 countries, including Switzerland, Germany, and France. About 300 million tons of goods and products move through it each year. The Rhine is Germany's most important shipping route, accounting for 80% of its water freight. But officials say barges are now carrying only 1/4 to half of their usual capacity. And economists say the disruption could slow Europe's largest economy.
Scientists warn it could become Europe's worst drought in more than 500 years. Water scarcity has hit more than 60% of the continent, from Italy to the UK. An unusually dry winter and scorching summer heat have reduced rivers to trickles. The historic water reserve lows have forced governments to restrict supplies. Well, that shortage is seriously affecting nearly everything from agriculture to the shipping industry. Bernard Smith looks at the impact in Toulouse in southwestern France.
I've never seen the river as low as this, Stéphane Marty tells me. He's a fisheries officer. In a normal year, the level of the Garonne here would be above our heads. The river cuts through Toulouse. It's the city's lifeblood, providing drinking water, irrigating farmland and cooling a nuclear plant. Stéphane has had to take fish out of the river and put them into special tanks because the water is too warm.
It's complicated. Everything is connected. There will be less snow in the mountains. The glaciers will melt sooner. This year there has been much less snow, so less water in the mountain lakes. So pumping of the lakes is lower to keep the water longer.
Over 3 weeks, 40% of the water held in reserve in hydroelectric dams in the Pyrenees Mountains has been released into the Garonne to keep it flowing. Just. Heat waves in Europe are increasing at a faster rate than almost anywhere else on the planet. And global warming increases the likelihood of drought, drying out soils and vegetation.
Là, il va nous falloir minimum 60 mm pour pouvoir reprendre les sols après la moisson.
We need 60 millimetres of rainfall to be able to replant the soil, Christelle Carpentier tells me. The forecast is for 3 millimetres this week. It's not enough.
No.
The corn harvest across France is expected to be 18.5% lower this year than last. There's already a global shortage because of the war in Ukraine. Even the sunflowers have turned away from the scorching sun. Where there is access to water, there isn't enough to go around. Christelle says she'll lose more than 30% of her crop this year.
If we don't get enough water in this region, there will be no viable agriculture. Even today, the cattle farmers here have no grass on their fields. Today, we are on a land where it's crucial to develop irrigation, if only to be able to achieve minimum profitability.
France's worst drought since records began in 1958 has affected so many aspects of how people live here.
And I think we will work a lot
We will train the kayak, and we will walk because there is not enough water for the floating.
In July, rainfall across France was down 84% compared to normal, according to the French Weather Service. The summer isn't over yet. Bernard Smith, Al Jazeera, Toulouse, southwest France.
Well, joining us from Munich now is Dr. Miranda Schruers, Chair of Environmental and Climate Policy at the Technical University of Munich. Good to have you with us. So Europe has seen drought before, but let's put it into perspective. How big of a challenge is this one?
This is a very major drought that is impacting Europe right now. As much as 47% of the European continent is in some level of drought danger. Of that 47%, about 17% is considered in severe drought right now, and the other areas are moving in that direction. So we haven't seen droughts like this too often. 2018 was a very, very bad drought year. 2018 was considered a 1 in 500 year drought. This is a second 1 in 500 year drought. And this means that Europe needs to prepare for a different kind of climate in the future.
And now we're seeing the transport of coal. We're seeing those hydro power plants, nuclear plants. They're also being impacted by this drought, right? What's that going to mean for an already critical European energy situation?
You are so right. Right now, the rivers in Europe are at historic lows. The Po River in Italy, the Rhine River traveling from Switzerland through the Netherlands. And the water is so low that we are no longer able to transport many kinds of materials by barge, which means that they have to be shipped by truck or by rail, which adds to the costs of shipping. Sometimes materials can't be shipped at all right now. So this is an added challenge on top of the prices that are skyrocketing because of the war in the Ukraine and the limited gas supplies from Russia right now. So this is a very challenging time for the European continent, and we're going to definitely see some very heavy costs associated with this drought.
You mentioned there the rising costs, transport, that's going to go on and be passed on to goods, right? What is that going to mean for people who are already struggling with the rising cost of living?
Well, of course, this has us very worried. Energy poverty is already a concern because of the war in the Ukraine and the increase in gas and oil and coal prices. It also means that now food prices will become more expensive, goods and materials will become more expensive. So this really emphasizes for us right now taking every step possible to be more resource efficient. And it also means we're going to have to do some planning for the future.
And you mentioned shipping there also getting impacted. What is that going to mean for the already complicated situation with supply chains?
Yes, this is, again, just an added crisis on top of other crises. So right now, we are seeing worldwide problems with supply chains, difficulties in moving goods. It's partly the COVID problem, for example, in China. It's partly energy costs. And so this is really making it difficult for many firms that simply aren't getting the supplies they need to be able to produce their products. And we are hearing about factories that are having to go into temporary stop in terms of production simply because they're not getting the parts that they need to continue with production.
I'm not going to at all ask you for too much. Just bring out your magic wand now and tell us what's the solution for all of this. Are European governments doing the right things?
I think Europe is just now waking up to the reality that we don't only need an energy transition, we're going to need a water management transition. We haven't really prepared Europe for the droughts that seem to be coming more and more frequently. So I don't think there's a single easy solution, but we're going to have to be better at saving water. We're going to have to be better at recycling water. We're going to have to develop more cooling systems so that people have places to escape to when it's too hot. Europe needs to rethink what the climate is going to be like in the years ahead. And it's not just Europe, it will be other parts of the world as well.
I wonder what that means then for, I mean, if this is going to go on for a while, as you indicated there isn't a simple solution. What does that mean? Are we looking at inflation? Are we looking at recession for a while then?
Well, of course, the hope is that the drought will break. Probably for the next couple of months, it's going to remain very challenging. We saw in 2018 between a 10 and 30% loss in agricultural sector due to the drought. Estimates are that just the impact of the low water levels in the Rhine River could cost the German economy as much as 0.2% of the annual economy. So the impacts are indeed huge. And if this is not just a single 1 in 500-year event, but something that we're going to start to see numerous times every decade, we need to rethink a lot of things. And it really points to just how important it is that we develop circular economies, resource-efficient economies, water-efficient economies. We've been pushing the planet to its limits, and we're starting to feel the price.
All right, lovely talking to you, Dr. Miranda.
Thank you very much.
It's not just in Europe. Parts of the western United States are also in the grip of a 23-year drought. That's the worst on record. And taps are running dry in Mexico too. Just 10% of dams across the country are full. The water crisis has reached critical levels in Mexico's wealthiest city. Manuel Rapala reports from Monterrey.
Extreme drought conditions in northern
People here say it's like a tornado of fire that swept away everything within seconds. Those who survived are trying to figure out what happened as they assess the damage.
I don't understand how it happened. It was like a whirlwind. I helped the children run. I couldn't do anything because of what was happening outside. You can see my house. The garage is destroyed. I couldn't save anything. It's God's will. Thank God the children are safe.
Forest fires have become an annual occurrence in Algeria, where climate change is turning large areas into a tinderbox. Most of the deaths this time have occurred in the El Tarf region near the eastern border with Tunisia, where temperatures have reached 48 degrees Celsius. Hundreds of people have had to flee their homes, with many more having suffered from burns or respiratory issues as a result of the smoke. Some are blaming arsonists.
What do you gain when you set a fire and people die? What does the arsonist gain from setting these fires? I hope his heart burns.
Across the country, dozens of fires are still burning, with authorities concerned strong winds and a blistering heat wave could spark new flames that they are ill-equipped to fight.